Hi, welcome to the Play Typer Guy podcast. I'm Stephen Robinson. Joining me today is Evan Barker. Evan is a former Democratic campaign operative and political strategist. Her upcoming book, Nothing Left, explores her departure from the Democratic Party. And we had planned to discuss this more in depth when the book is released this summer. But today we're actually talking about former Representative Eric Swalwell, who resigned from Congress this week after his campaign for California governor imploded due to multiple allegations of sexual harassment and sexual assault. More women have come forward in the wake of the scandal. There could be even more coming. Evan, once again, thank you for joining me. And Swalwell, I would say, arguably represents everything that motivated you to leave your former party in certain ways, right? Like he's kind of a scumbag, a sleaze, empty suit has been a fair criticism of him. However, I noticed you did not immediately pounce on his political grave when the story broke last week. Can you tell us why and what, and your reaction immediately when the allegations broke?
Yeah, so right, exactly. Just as you said, Eric Swalwell does not represent to me what I wanted the Democratic Party to become. The direction that he represents is a pretty big reason that I left the party, actually. He doesn't stand for much. He, as you said, he's an empty suit. He's a shill. He just basically is like a MSNBC talking head. And just sort of represented somebody that is like anti-Donald Trump, right? And nothing else. And so, as much as I don't like that direction for the party, what I hate more than that, and another reason why I left the Democrats, is because of the underlying just propensity for them to cancel people and to not give people the benefit of the doubt and to just treat people as if they are guilty because of an accusation. And it's not just sex politics. There's also, other things related to like race politics and just or like being accused of being like anti-Semitic or being accused of being racist or being accused of being a rapist or misogynist. It's just like anytime one of these like highly personal accusations is thrown at somebody, there is this mentality on the left, especially. I'm not saying it doesn't exist on the right at all, but on the left especially, to just go ahead and take these anonymous accusations and allegations as fact. And that's what I have a problem with. So yeah, I started posting on X a few days ago after this happened, and it went pretty viral because I was probably saying something that most people weren't saying, because I think most people are afraid in situations like this to go against the grain and to question anonymous allegations. I guess now at this point they're not anonymous, but at the time when I first started posting, they were. And they're afraid because if they question them, they'll automatically be labeled like a rape apologist or smeared as like promoting rape culture. And I don't like this mob mentality that I think has like sickened our discourse, especially over the last 10 years. It probably started before that, but I think it's gotten worse and worse as time has gone on. And it's funny, I kind of thought Me Too was over, but apparently it's not. So
We discussed this before starting. From a liberal standpoint, believing in a presumption of innocence is sort of should be the core of what we are, but it's the exception, of course, is obviously for sexual assault allegations. And one could argue that because it's so horrific, as I said, I don't care if someone says I stole money or whatever. I mean, I do care, but like that part of my reputation, okay, fine. If you're going to believe I'm a thief, okay, or I'm a plagiarist, that's offensive, but fine. But I would hope that there'd be an opportunity to, if you are accused of something, and I think a lot of the liberal response is that you're never going to be accused of anything falsely. So don't worry about that. And I think that is not necessarily one. I don't think that's not where most Americans are. I feel like most Americans would worry about that. And um, I guess my question also is why do you think that there was such a pushback against the idea of, well, okay, these are very serious allegations. Um, let's have a process to play out. And there's a difference, right? There's a difference between saying, okay, you can't possibly win an election with these allegations. Maybe you should drop out and you need to give up your seat or you need to go to jail. These are all varying degrees of where it's going. But saying, let's have a process, let's figure out, let's delve into them. I mean, I was seeing a lot of, well, these are deeply sourced contemporaneous accusations in the press, so that alone would be enough. What's your thought on that?
Well, yeah, and I want to go back to the original point that you made. People like the idea in America, like that's something that makes America uniquely amazing, right? Is that we are, like, in America, we have a right to due process. We are presumed innocent until proven guilty. I think people like that concept. They like it when it applies to them. But I think a lot of times in practice, especially when it comes to sexual assault allegations, especially, that's not the way it plays out. And it ends up becoming like this almost like gender panic, like this Me Too gender panic, where I mean, you can literally just like one anonymous allegation, and I'm not even just talking about the Swalwell situation, right? But just one anonymous allegation is enough to completely destabilize and destroy somebody's life and destroy somebody's career. And I would see this all the time. I'm actually writing an article that's going to come out soon about, I'm going to going like deeper into my thoughts, but I've seen this play out behind the scenes when I was working in Democratic politics. This isn't even something I wrote about in my book because there's just too many things to talk about in the book. But this, specific story, I was working on a campaign once where, and I'm obviously not going to say who it was, but they were running for a federal office. It was a man, and out of nowhere, a woman anonymously accused him on Twitter of rape, and that accusation did not end up going into the press, although I think they tried to get it into the press, but the press decided that they didn't want to publish it. But it was just that one person posting something anonymously on Twitter was enough to completely rock the campaign internally. Consultants were questioning whether or not they should abandon him. Like, I felt so sorry for this politician, actually, who, swore up and down like he had never even met this person. And the closest people to him on the campaign were like secretly questioning behind the scenes if it was true or not. And I just, like, I think that I mean, obviously I can't tell people how to like litigate these situations or like how to handle them, but I do think that there's, these high profile attorneys that that really want to build their own profiles up, and so they use these women and they parade them out in front of cameras, and they get them to make these public statements instead of handling it privately, instead of going directly to the police. And then we end up seeing this whole court, like this whole trial, play out in the court of public opinion. And it's like, and it takes a lot of courage to like stand up and to be like, wait a second, like what happened to innocent until proven guilty? And I'm extremely skeptical, especially, and this is part of the reason that I spoke out when I saw these allegations first come out, is like I am extremely skeptical when it comes to accusations against politicians, especially when it is so close to an election.
Mhm.
Because like, why now? And obviously, the woman that came out today, I did you see the press conference just an hour ago?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. That is, to me, that is the first like true rape allegation that we've seen.
Um, Yeah, and I could just interrupt. For this woman had made the allegation that Swalwell had drugged her. It's consistent with some other stories that we heard. Um, and I was seeing some folks who, at the time, I thought was pretty, frankly, irresponsible. There were major Democratic figures, I'm not going to name them, stating that the women who said that they were incapacitated uh, and had had too much to drink, there was no way that these women would have gotten blackout drunk. What are the odds of that? He must have drugged them, which seems to be a pretty
That's a huge
big
leap.
leap to make and seems sort of irresponsible. Like, people do get blackout drunk. As someone might said, have you been around sometimes people, men and women in their early mid 20s, they drink way too much. And but yes, the allegations there, it is very hard to, with time to prosecute that. And that becomes a challenge. And to your point, in politics, the allegations enough to derail things correctly, right? And to blow up a campaign, to sort of do it, in what would seem privately, or at least with the police, and the police would say, "Here's what we can prosecute." Um, that would seem, in certain ways, appropriate, but others would say, "Okay, well, that allows you to just bury. There's all going to be all these accusations, and so they're just going to get buried." And that becomes sort of the hard thing of figuring out, well, what is appropriate, especially and also what what is a fair sense for anyone accused to be able to then say this didn't happen. So I've seen, again, from prominent uh, Democratic figures, have called Swalwell a sociopath simply for stating that he didn't do it. But I mean, affirming his innocence is his right, certainly, or that he's not guilty. Or I believe that to say that it was consensual, but then that led to something that I've seen you go into as well. So again, we have this actual, the first case, as you said, that you believe would qualify as sexual assault, but the others were um, consent issues, where I saw someone
Right.
state that the fact it was non-consensual just by virtue of his being their boss. Um, and it's incredibly, I want to clarify for the record,
That's
I
so
thought
offensive to me. Can I just
it's
say that?
incredibly stupid. It's incredibly stupid for him to have done that, to have pursued staff. Katie Hill, who's also from California, lost her job because she had a consensual affair with a staffer.
I don't
Like,
think he should have resigned, by the way. I always
the
thought.
the ethics rules are what they are, and the fact that he was pursuing staffers after Katie Hill was forced out, either from a clear political hit. So, if just to be aware that there are political hits that could occur even with consensual affairs, because it would be an ethics violation, just seems incredibly reckless and stupid. I call it the Icarus effect. Like, what are you doing? Like, why are you doing this? Um, and so, but the idea that it was inherently, but this has been a long time thing. You said it's insulting, but I've seen this go back to um, where we've gone in the past 20 or 30 years, because there are people who insist that
Right.
Monica Lewinsky could not have consented to sex with Bill. And even she says it was a consensual affair. It was stupid. It was reckless. But there are a lot of people who insist that because he's the president, the power imbalance. So, which is fine, but I don't think that's, again, something that America is sort of consistent with, as far as believing that no one who's a boss should ever date, or a coworker, or anyone who has a position of authority.
I mean, if you take it to its logical conclusion, and this is something I actually posted, this is a tweet I posted. If you take this idea that because of this power imbalance, a woman is not able to consent with her boss, right? To its logical conclusion, you're basically saying that a woman can never consent to sex with a man who is taller than her. There's a power imbalance, has more money than her. There's a power imbalance, is smarter than her. They're going to start banning relationships that have IQ gaps, is older than her, even if she's a legal adult, even if she's 18 years old, has ever treated her poorly, or has any kind of economic relationship to her at all. I mean, that would make it so that, I guess, if you're in Nevada and you're at a brothel and you hire a prostitute, like, typically, like, is that rape? Because there's an economic relationship because you're hiring her to do a job. I mean, it's like, taken to its logical conclusion, it makes it so that women seem like they have no agency, that we have to infantilize them. I mean, she was over 21 years old. She was old enough to drink alcohol. She was a legal adult. And she had a sexting relationship with her boss that eventually went into the real world. He asked her to give him oral sex. She obliged. She was stone cold sober. I mean, I've had guys come on to me before, Stephen, and like guys that, like, honestly, people that I've worked with in politics before too. And I've just said no. And for some reason, just saying that to people has, like, makes them go insane. It makes them,
Sure.
like, it makes them go crazy. They're like, and it's just not fair. It's like, it's like, anytime a woman decides, and the other thing that drives me so crazy about the first allegation, right, the one that kind of like started all of this, is that she had sex with him. She said she was drunk and, wasn't able to consent, right? But at the same time, it's like, we don't know how much he drank. We don't know if he blacked out during the intercourse, right? Are we going to start asking all men and women before they have any sort of sex with each other to start, like, submitting to breathalyzers to, like, check and make sure that they're not too intoxicated to not be able to consent? I mean, is that, like, the place that we need to go to in a society? I think that's a little crazy. And then, 5 years later, she has sex with him again. Okay, if I felt like somebody sexually assaulted me, I would not hang out with them again. I just wouldn't. Like, I would not
Yeah.
go and meet them for drinks again and put myself in that situation again. If I felt like if there was any sort of question about the first time, that we had sex, like, if there was any sort of question in my brain about it, I would not go back and, like, hang out with them again.
You've gotten a lot of pushback against that making that statement, and you were
Yeah.
called some pretty nasty things online for this. And but it, and this goes to the larger sense of to because with this type of situation, if it were either just either an ethics investigation or even at a trial, when in America you have a right to make a defense, like it will be tough questions like that. You're asking, frankly, some polite questions than a defense attorney would ask. But there is this sense of that is rape culture, or that is cruel, or that is abusive to interrogate a woman on those questions or ask those choices. But essentially, you're trying to determine whether there's consent or not. And I think that's why it was sort of, I guess, going to the point of it is inherently impossible to give consent. And it's also interesting. So it went from, she did not say that Swalwell ever conditioned her future employment on having sex with him. It was more that if I said no, he might not help my career, which I'm sympathetic towards. That's terrible. But at the same time, that is, as you have said, a very different thing, correct? And
Yeah, it's totally different. It's like, obviously the guy's sleazy. Obviously the guy is horny. You know what I mean? Obviously he's kind of a slime ball. Obviously these are all, like, obvious things, right? Obviously the decisions he made were morally questionable, right? He cheated on his wife. But there's a difference between being, like, morally questionable and being an outright rapist. And I think something that, until this press conference this morning, there has not, like, in my mind, it's like there hasn't been, like, a true accusation of, like, he is a rapist, like, intentionally. Like, if you intentionally drug somebody, like, clearly, yes, like, you're trying, but that still doesn't mean he did it, right? An allegation does not equal conviction. And I think that, like, that's the problem that I have, is that everybody just completely goes crazy. They jump to these insane conclusions, and men have no way to defend themselves. And I'm sorry, but like, as you said, like believing all women should not equate to that we don't believe all men. And like, why can't I say that I don't automatically believe all women? Why is that so controversial to say? Like, human beings lie. And this is what I said in my video. Sometimes they just reframe things in their mind to make themselves feel better about a regretful decision. So like the difference between the first allegation and the second allegation with the first woman that accused him was that the first time that she got drunk and they had sex, or that they got drunk and they had sex, she did not have a boyfriend. The second time, she did have a boyfriend. She probably woke up, felt panicked about cheating on her boyfriend, and then potentially reframed it to make herself feel better. Like, well, I wouldn't have done that if I hadn't been drinking, and because I was drinking, I couldn't have consented. And I think that's where like a lot of this stuff gets really blurry. Like, as you said, it's not the same as accusing somebody of shoplifting, or even accusing somebody of just like saying a bad word or something like that, right? It's like you are throwing out an accusation that can completely destroy them, that can land them behind bars. And I think to do that, like, there has to be a higher bar.
Well, yes. And I guess there is a difference between a scumbag or caddish behavior and being a rapist. And he should not be in public life. He should whatever. But obviously in our society, that is different from, like, I think people are saying.
But can
like,
I just say,
prison
sorry to interrupt you, Stephen, but can I just say something? Accusations around men in power used to like be the norm, you know. And I'm sorry, I shouldn't say accusations. Accusations of like being a philanderer, of cheating on your wife, of having extramarital affairs. Like some of the most iconic men in Democratic politics, or just in politics, have been philanderers. Like, for example, FDR was accused of cheating on his wife a lot. And you know what? He did some of the most incredible things for our country, and was like the director of like major social progress that we've had in this country. All right. By today's standards, FDR would have never been able to become president of today's modern Democratic Party. JFK. I don't always like all of Bill Clinton's policies, but he was a very talented politician. Bill Clinton, Arnold Schwarzenegger. I mean, John Edwards. There's been so many other male politicians that have been accused of being a philanderer. The difference is that those accusations were done in a time when being a philanderer was like, or being accused of sexual misconduct did not automatically equate to being a rapist. Did not automatically come with a rape allegation.
It was just that you're a sleazebag, and I think that was with my sense was Swalwell's a sleazebag, John Edwards was a sleazebag. But if we go back to Clinton, by today's standards, and I think that's relevant only in the sense of he was campaigning for for Kamala Harris in the last election. He's still a very prominent figure in Democratic politics, but by today's standards, Bill Clinton's would it be considered a rapist or canceled a rapist? Like, again, his affair with Lewinsky would it be deemed non-consensual because he was obviously in a far more powerful position. Paula Jones accused him of exposing himself to her, which would be he would consider assault because that is without her consent. And of course, Juanita Broderick, and those are known accusations. Hillary Clinton remained with him. Again, she's not responsible for his choices, but we are also seeing people say that Swalwell's friends must have known, and they are responsible somehow because they didn't stop him or whatever. So
like, could you imagine if the Clinton scandal broke today? They would be saying Hillary Clinton had some part in it, that she was like, it's like, or her even. I think Hillary Clinton, I could be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure she's ascribed blame to Monica Lewinsky before publicly. So like her even doing that would make her a rape apologist today.
Well, sure. She famously was never, I believe, woman. I mean, she believed women advocate in the 90s. I mean, famously, she said the allegations were part of a vast right-wing conspiracy, to the extent that it was true. I mean, at the time, in the 90s, I described it as, because I was in my mid-20s at the time, and I described it as like it was a witch hunt, but he was an actual witch. He actually did the stuff. So this was similar. She would be acute. It'd be very difficult for her to have the career she did afterward, for being someone who's basically defending her husband for all of these things.
Right.
Kamala Harris's husband had an affair with not a nanny. It was framed as a nanny. That was untrue. It was actually a teacher at his kid's school, but that would seem a pretty big power imbalance
That's
as
a
well.
power dynamic, right?
And you know, Kamala Harris knew this and does not consider him a rapist or a scuzzbag, just someone who made a human mistake. And I only bring this all up because I think I've always said that we need to have a sort of politics that can kind of, as you say, we kind of can go to extremes a lot with people that we're not applying consistently, and that is sort of a problem, you know. And you've talked about this, you know, you have a son, and a lot of the Me Too backlash was sort of like, what do we tell young men? And I think a lot of it came from women like yourself. I think Democrats were surprised that a lot of, you know, women like yourself are like, okay, well, how do I raise my son in this world? And you're saying just don't go out and rape is not quite the answer.
That's not I mean,
no. I mean, it's legit. I mean, yes, I would like to say don't go out but yeah, and it's fascinating because you talk about sex positive feminism, right? I would be someone who's I would be accused of being pretty conservative on this, almost like a Mike Pence, like that. If I would tell my son, you know, it is a very bad idea to get drunk or to have a lot of drinks or to, frankly, and not even just with colleagues, because I think this would be an issue for Swalwell if these were just women he weren't working with, but he picked up at a bar, right? Like it would still be an issue in these allegations. And I would say to have, when you go to a bar and you don't really know, right? You don't know you don't know who's an expert. You've had a couple drinks. Who can tell how drunk someone is, or whether or not they really feel, or that they believe that they are drunk or sober enough to consent to something? And that's not like making excuses. It's just trying to, like,
it's true.
word of caution. And I think what comes up is, I think a lot of people have the image of a clear-cut case, right? Fall down drunk. This woman's fall down drunk. She's barely, and that's the movies, right? She's barely upright. And then she passes out and the guy has his way with her. It's repulsive, right? It's terrible. But as someone,
like, yeah.
And and we're both, you know, you're younger than I am, but we've both been young and out in college. That's not always true. There are you know, people who seemingly as together as you are right now are not sober. They wake up the next day, especially if they, and oddly enough, if there's someone who does it a lot, that they're more inclined. And it's, for me, it's not just that I'm telling my son or how I was once that you can't trust women or women are terrible. That's not what I'm doing. It's just that, frankly, I don't want you, or I never wanted this for myself, and I don't want this for my son, to be in a situation where someone just regrets. To me, sex is a very vulnerable thing. You're kind of being vulnerable with someone, and I don't want them to wake up being like, oh my God, what have I done? This is horrible. And certainly to feel like they were put in that situation unfairly, or they were taken advantage of. That's a terrible thing to do to someone. Even if they don't make an accusation, I don't want someone to go away thinking that way. And the best way, frankly, is to, you know, frankly, have sex with people who you've known for a bit and in a relationship with. That makes me sound like a crazy right-wing.
No, it doesn't.
Whatever.
Not to me. I mean, it's so crazy because I feel like that is like a socially, I guess I feel like that's like sort of a liberal position to take, you know, at this point, like, you know what I mean? I know people that I'm close to that are in my family actually that have teenage boys that are, you know, their sons are teenagers in high school. And, you know, they basically had to sit down and have the same conversations with them where they're like, if a girl has had one drink, you should probably not have any sort of romantic relationship with her after she's had a drink because it is just too risky. You know, that like and again, it's like this is part of the problem with the excesses of Me Too is that it's made normal interactions between men and women change. It's made men you know, change their behavior out of fear. And they can't have like genuine interactions with women anymore. You know, going back to that candidate that I told you about that was accused, after that happened on the campaign, he ended up traveling with a male staff member everywhere, literally everywhere, even around me, I had already been working with him for over a year when this happened. He still traveled around with him and was in every meeting with him after that because they wanted there to be a third party there in case any sort of accusations happened. It permanently changed the way that this guy had to like move about in the world. And I think like this is the damage that Me Too has done. And when I bring this up,
You were quite lectured about this. I saw this online.
They get really, really mad at me and they're like, oh, I'm sorry, your preferences, like, you know, your preferences are going to make it unsafe for everybody else. And it's like, well, I know that we're trying to protect victims, but like, what about the victims of false accusations? Like, what about the victims of mob and cancel culture? Especially when it comes to, you know, it's like, it's one thing to like say somebody's racist. It's a horrible thing to say somebody's racist. It can like, when they're not, you know, it can make them lose their job. It can make them lose all sorts of, you know, opportunities. Like, it is horrible. But when you're saying that somebody has committed an act of sexual violence, right? You could actually put them in jail for that. So it is like another level of cancel culture. And I think that we as women need to be able to have more grown-up conversations about it. And like I truly think a lot of women, especially the women that I know in Democratic politics, like they don't think that they're doing anything wrong. I don't think most of them are intentionally trying to go on a witch hunt towards men. I have seen that happen though. I actually have seen women weaponize sex politics to their advantage to actually hurt people, knowing the backlash that would come from it. I have seen that. But I think most of the time it's like this pile-on effect of people that are just piling on that want to protect future victims. Like on the CBS interview this morning, I think they interviewed the influencer that's accusing him of just sending her unwanted sexual text messages. By the way, if somebody's texting you dick pics and you don't want them, you're allowed to block them. You like just to any woman that's listening out there, if a man sends you a sex message and you don't like it, block them. Like that's it. Like don't like tell them not to do it anymore and block them. You don't have to keep receiving them because you think it's going to like help advance your career or something. And maybe this is like what we as women should be saying to each other. Like you have agency. You're allowed to tell these guys to buzz off if you don't like something that they're doing. Anyway.
Yes, and I oppose any sort of culture where this happens in a sense, right? That's my view. And scumbags that are doing this, I don't approve of that. That is very different from my saying that there should be that especially there should have been like the House has ethics rules.
Right.
Go in, you know, and do it. And when that being seen as a rape apology was weird for me because it's kind of like, again, this is one area, because for anything else, we're very much in a sense of rather one guilty person go free than a innocent person be convicted is a sort of is a normal liberal view of the criminal justice system.
Right.
That we want things to be, you know, we'd rather that happen. If we're
I mean,
talking about drug dealers or even murderers, the idea of like, okay, well, the old lady's, the eyewitness testimony, but the old lady saw it, she was wrong, and the guy's gonna like
the death
want
penalty.
like to be,
The death penalty. And by the way, kind of fun. I've always been in favor of the death penalty. Even when I was a Democrat, I was in favor of the death penalty. Maybe I'm inconsistent on this, but I think that there's some crimes that warrant it. But I've talked to so many liberals that are against the death penalty because of the fact that it means one person, if one innocent person is killed by the state, that's too many. And that's like a very principled position to take. I understand that position. And that's basically my position on all of this.
Yes,
Is
that's just
that
my position on all things, which is just so let there be a process. And I felt like, and then, in our society, you face your accusers, you can mount a vigorous defense. That is not saying this is a good guy. That is not saying that he's, that he should be a governor. I mean, he
no,
should have, dropped out. It is not meaning he should stay in the House, even though the House has rules for ethics violations that should have been through. But the idea that, him affirming any response, and again, I've seen that where people have said that he's called the allegations false, but then he resigned. So, and as you said, like his resigning then became somehow seen as an admission of guilt when it's basically saying, well, I can't politically thrive in this, which is very different. So,
I was never ratioed, Stephen, on any post that I made. I just want to say that is so interesting is that, yes, there were a lot of loud comments of people that were angry with me, but I would say that I think the majority of the people actually feel like I do. But they're afraid to say it. They're afraid to share it, because they don't want the reaction to come. Like, I actually think most people in our country are fundamentally liberal on this issue, and they believe in innocence before guilt. And I just think that it's a dangerous thing to talk about now.
yeah.
And I
Well,
thought we had moved. I thought there was a vibe shift.
I think with Clinton, as you said, everything that when I was a kid, when he was, it was really from the right that he is just the fact that he's a womanizer, he's a scumbag, even though, frankly, past Republicans had done screwy stuff as well. But he was sort of so openly, I guess, this way. And then there was sort of, Move On, which exists, was basically a pro-Clinton pack. It started to say, let's move on from these sex scandals. That's how it started.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's the history of Move On. It was in the late 90s with the Lewinsky, and it was like, enough already with this, move on. And it was all about raising money, raising awareness to defend Clinton during the Starr Report and so on. And, so this idea that someone is doing this scuzzy stuff and they're like, that's fine, it's different. They were making that distinction between caddish behavior and same with Gary Hart. And it's seen as like, who knows, Gary Hart could have been a decent candidate. He just was a scuzzbag in this one way. We were making distinctions. I think we're less inclined to do that now. And for good or for ill, some of these guys, their behavior was abusive to women and was terrible, but at the and we could have a dialogue about why someone like Swalwell thought, especially after what happened to Katie Hill and with others, that he can be sending unsolicited pictures to what, like the sense of granted in our liberal world now, I think it would be that he has a problem, either an addiction or has alcoholism.
Yeah,
because he's drunk or something.
Yeah.
So and it'd be interesting when that comes out, like what he has when he finally speaks and concedes all the terrible stuff that he has done. Obviously, he will probably not say that he raped women. But again, that's a day in court. And if he's found to have drugged women, he deserves to have, as my mother would say, be buried underneath the jail. But there should be a process for that, and we had that. And I think the rush to it is fascinating. I saw a lot of Democrats who felt very proud of like, well, we, unlike the Republicans, we we get rid of our own when something like this happens. And regardless of the morality of that, I think from a political standpoint, it and it's no one wants to really hear this. It just makes you look like someone who is willing to cut people loose at a moment's notice. And when, and this happens on lesser issues with people like Graham Plattner and with others, JD Vance and others have done a more effective job of stating, like, we're not going to ruin someone's life
Yes.
over a bad pun or whatever, which I think resonates with more people, right or wrong. We can debate that, but I think Democrats are in denial of that is occurring. So when Lindsey Graham, at the height of the Kavanaugh accusations, was his profile picture on then Twitter was him with Kavanaugh, and he was like, we're not going to let these allegations ruin his life. And he was found that resonated potentially more than the idea that, yeah, you're my friend today, but the first accusation that comes and you're politically, I'm going to cast
It's a
you.
culture issue. It's a culture difference between the two parties. It's real. Like, and it's almost like a realignment, because like what you were saying earlier about Bill Clinton, I mean, I think that he used to get attacked from the evangelical, like, moral right, right? And
Mhm.
almost like the parties have shifted in this way, that the Democrats are now the ones that are obsessed with morality and
Oh
purging
yeah.
who's amoral, right?
And have you heard of Kristen Sinema? She had admitted to an affair with her bodyguard in 2024 who's under security detail, who worked with
Our
her.
dynamic.
Yes, that would have been obviously, she would have had to resign, I presume, because that would have been not a consensual. So I think again, I think the reckoning here has to be eventually like, just stop. You can't safely to the extent that there was a party, even consensually, the party is over. It's just not viable. But what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it seems like that's the direction that people want to go in, that they just want to completely criminalize and outlaw any sort of workplace relationship. Um, and I don't think that it's inherently wrong for an employee and their boss to have a consensual relationship. I think that, like, as long as it's consensual and both parties are interested, a lot of families have been created out of these sort of situations. I have a friend who ended up marrying her boss, and they have, a beautiful life together now. And so I don't think that it's inherently, like, wrong. I think that if there's like pressure, or like, the person is saying, like, you have to do this for me, or I'm not going to promote you, like, obviously that's a completely different thing. But I don't think that it's inherently wrong to have a relationship with your boss. And I guess that's also a controversial belief to have. I didn't know it was controversial, actually. Um, but even just saying that, like, people truly don't believe that you're able to consent, and I don't understand it.
Yeah, I mean, it's inconsistent because again, it's happening. So if
Happening.
that's going to be the rule, make that the rule. It's certainly the rule I support. I think that's what makes the most sense. I think what often happens in my frustration is that people kind of sometimes don't want the hard rule. They want sort of the flexibility of, like, well, it's like obscenity. You know it when you see it, which is not, you can't have that with something like consent, right? Because that's going to, especially if it's the ramifications of misreading something is going to be so dire. Why would anyone, if you were my boss, why would you ask me out if there's like, oh, well, he's saying yes, but maybe he's only saying yes because he doesn't want to get fired, or there's no, like, if you can't trust what I'm saying, in other words, right? It doesn't, it's impossible to like really then effectively gauge consent. And I think that's what you were sort of getting at, right? With a lot of the initial rhetoric you were seeing.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think I just it can it's so funny to me that people think that the boss has all of the power in these situations, because to me it's like, if a boss makes a move on his subordinate and then she says no, and she decides to then report him, I mean, there's like ton and or she says no and then she faces some sort of like workplace repercussions for saying no. There's so many legal avenues in our system that women can take that they're able to like file lawsuits. They're able, I mean, they can end up getting like a really, really big payday actually um, from this like unfortunate situation happening. And so, I mean, I don't know. I don't think that at the end of the day, I just want women to have agency and I want us to be able to like look at each other and understand that we have more power than we may think. And I think that there has been this whole like victim driven culture narrative for the past like 15 years that has made a lot of people think that they don't have agency, and we do. And you know, if we don't like something, we have the right to say no. We don't have to continue being nice or feeding somebody's like fantasies because we think that it's going to help us get ahead in a job, or that if we don't, there'll be some sort of like political repercussions. Clearly, the culture is structured in a way right now that, you know, you're able to completely destroy somebody's like life if you don't like the advances that they made on you while you were working for them. So yeah, I just want more. I want more people to take agency, and I think that that is a change that I'd like to see in the Democratic Party, especially. You know, is like this move away from like victim culture and victimhood, and to just like, yeah, we do, you know, we live in America. We live in a place where, you know, you're able to hire a lawyer, you're able to go to the press, you have, you know, freedom of speech. There is a criminal justice system. People are able to go to court if they don't like something that's been done to them. You know, like we are not all victims and survivors. And I think that using those words so loosely really does it's a little offensive. It's like it is taking away from actual sexual assault survivors and actual sexual assault victims. And that's actually, this is a kind of another thing, but that's, you know, a conversation, especially during the Kavanaugh trials, that I was having in private with a lot of my very liberal friends that had been through sexual assault, actually. And you know, they said that to me privately, that they felt like during Me Too, the bounds of what was sexual assault and what wasn't sexual assault became so loose and so flagrant that it actually undermined and delegitimized instances of true rape and sexual assault. And I think at the heart of it, that's probably what I have the biggest problem with.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, a lot of liberals, and not just women, I noticed a lot of uh, very pious men criticizing you, calling you a quote unquote pick me, which is a very offensive term. Something in the left that I think is a problem where there's this weird thing on the left that I've noticed that's not, which is that if you're a woman or a person of color, so of us, and you have views outside of what is sort of the conventional wisdom from the party, you are considered, you know, a trait, essentially a race or gender traitor, and you are smeared as a pick me, or you know, you're a clout chaser, as someone has called me, because I, you know, might defend a white podcaster or something from, you know, it is just a kind of absurd and not to me liberal, not because people are individuals. So you have an opinion, and I don't think it's being done just to get the support of men or to be seen as and to be seen as special. It's just that this is the opinion you have. And if you have an issue with it, just engage with that opinion. And I think the reason I wanted to have you on was so that we could have a conversation. We might agree or might disagree, but without inherently smearing each other. I think there's such an echo chamber. There's only in the echo chamber, and people they don't know how to have a dialogue with outside of that chamber, right? So, like, how do I can engage with someone who has a different opinion on this subject than I do, or who's seeing it differently? because I could only see them as a inherently negative person if they do. So by what you were posting, you were suddenly objectively a Marjorie Taylor Greene type, something they don't like, right? Which I think is not appropriate, but it's unfortunate. So I think that is a good segue for when you come back, hopefully in a couple months, so we could talk about your book and some of the stuff we're seeing that's been a sort of challenge within the party that I hope that we can, that Democrats will be able to resolve.
I hope Democrats read it.
Yes, I definitely.
That's who I really wrote it for, is for other Democrats to read. So I hope they read it. But yeah, thank you so much, Stephen, for having me on. It's really good to finally meet you in person. I know you reached out to me a long time ago, and it's been good to finally talk. And
great,
not in person, but over Zoom. So, and thanks for giving me space to explain my opinion without smearing me or calling me a pick-me. That's
no. Thank you so much. All right, like, share, subscribe, check out Evan on social media, and walk out for her book.
It's called Nothing Left: Confessions of a Democratic Operative. It's on Amazon.
All right, great. We will chat with you soon about it. Take care.